I slept with my husband's best friend and gave birth to his son. Hello, friends of Tangled Hearts. Welcome to our channel, where stories of love and passion unfold. Let's begin our exciting journey into the world of human relationships. My husband and I met at his best friend's wedding when we were both 22 years old. For me, it was love at first sight. Mark also showed signs of interest towards me the very next day, after the wedding. We met again in the park where our first date took place. Our romance was passionate and intense. Mark completely fulfilled me as a man and even more. He became the prince I had been waiting for deep down in my soul. He was intelligent, kind, handsome, caring, strong, and fair. He tried to cheer me up when I was sad, encouraged me in difficult situations, and helped me with my problems. He was my support, my ideal, and I sincerely loved him with all my heart. After 1 year, we started living together. And another year later, we got married. At that moment, the first difficulties for our marriage arose. My husband was never lazy. He always tried to help me in everything. There were never situations where I worked around the house, while he did nothing. He simply wasn't that kind of person. We cooked together, cleaned together, we did everything together. However, despite all his efforts, problems still struck our family. Financial problems. Being a young couple, we didn't earn as much money as we would have liked, which occasionally led to conflicts. After one of such conflicts escalated into our first major quarrel. I left home for 2 weeks. Despite his non-confrontational nature, Mark showed no desire to reconcile, and I was too proud to make the first move. In the evenings, I just sat and waited for him to take the first step. One of those evenings, Mark's best friend, Donovan, whom I met at his wedding, came to me. We were also friends, so seeing how upset I was, he came to support me. We just talked about nothing. Our conversation was very easy and casual, and I didn't even notice when it turned into a passionate kiss. We spent that night together, and I didn't regret our actions. I considered it a fair punishment for my husband's indifference. However, literally 3 days later, Mark came to me with a bouquet of roses, apologized for his behavior, and asked me to come back. As soon as I saw my beloved, the veil seemed to lift from my eyes, and I realized what I had done. But it was too late. So, I decided to forget about it and find any way to make amends to my husband. We moved back in together, and my husband became much more attentive to me. Everything was perfect until the day I found out I was pregnant. Reading the dates with horror, I realized that the father of the child was not my husband, but Donovan. I struggled with what to do for a long time, but I couldn't make a decision and continued to do nothing until it was too late for an abortion. So, the question of whether to give birth or not arose 6 months later. I gave birth to a son. Every night after leaving the maternity hospital, I looked at Mark and James and cried, realizing that because of my foolishness, I betrayed my beloved husband. I knew I had to tell him the truth, but I couldn't bear to break his heart. Throughout my pregnancy, he radiated happiness, telling everyone that his beloved wife would soon give him a son. And how he first looked at him in the maternity ward and couldn't hold back his tears, saying, "My little son, my joy, my father's pride," that's what my husband called our son. How could I tell him that all of this was actually a lie? In the end, I decided to tell him the truth, but only when James grew up a little, but that never happened. I kept lying. 14 years passed, and everything in our family was wonderful, and I had long forgotten about this deception, because a father is not the one who gives birth, but the one who raises. But as they say, all secrets eventually come to light. The truth was revealed entirely by accident when, during a move, my husband found and read my letters written to his best friend but never sent by me. Coming home in the evening, I found him standing by the window in the darkness, holding those letters in his hands. Seeing him, everything inside me shattered. I immediately knew. He knows. My husband. He said nothing, he just looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes, they were completely empty, like those of a dead man. I burst into tears, begged for forgiveness, tried to explain everything, but he said nothing in response. I understood what I had done and was ready to accept any punishment, but Mark, he just stepped away from the window, sat on the couch, and cried. Seeing this, I completely lost it. I couldn't stop crying, and he continued to silently stare into nothingness, tears streaming down his face. Then he stood up, said nothing, and left the apartment. And I just kept crying, realizing that I had shattered his entire life. My husband and I are 38 years old. James is our only child. We wanted to have another one, but it didn't work out because of my health problems. My beloved spent his whole life caring for his best friend's child. He was the meaning of life for him, his pride. And now he knows it's all a lie. That night, I only thought about what I had done. I wanted to die. Only because of our son did I not take my own life. The next morning, my husband came home, said nothing to me, gathered his things, and left, despite my attempts to stop him. It's been 2 months since that moment, but I still seek meetings with my beloved and try to beg for his forgiveness. Maybe I'm foolish, but I believe I still have a chance, because Mark still hasn't filed for divorce and continues to communicate with our son daily. Donovan accidentally found out about his paternity only a year after the birth. I thought this news wouldn't affect him, but to my greatest surprise, paternal feelings awakened in him. He offered me to leave my family and be with him, since I had given birth to his child, and he and his wife didn't have children and didn't need them in the near future. Naturally, I refused him because I have always loved only Mark, and I felt nothing but friendly sympathy for James's biological father, just as he felt for me. I didn't want him to ruin his family because of this mistake, and certainly couldn't allow him to ruin mine. In those letters, I begged him not to interfere in our lives, and to leave everything as it was. I told him how much I loved my husband, my son, how I cherished our family. However, the need to send them never arose. Donovan, after my constant requests to leave us alone, realized that a marriage out of impulse and without love would lead to nothing good. Instead, he started sending me money as unofficial child support, but I refused even that. In the end, Donovan left my life, although he continued to be friends with Mark all these 14 years, until that very evening when the truth came out in the letters. I don't know why I kept those letters. Perhaps it was because of my foolish sentimentality, and ultimately, it cost me the most precious thing in my life, my family. My husband has always been a wonderful person, but after our first major argument, I behaved like a fool, and out of spite towards him, I left home. Not to go to my husband's friend, but to my brother's, where I spent those 2 weeks with Donovan. We always had a good friendship. After the argument with Mark, we often talked on the phone. He tried to reassure me, urging me to return home to my husband, but I was waiting for Mark himself to say it. He's his friend, after all. But he continued to remain silent. One evening when my brother wasn't home, Donovan called and suggested coming over, saying that such things happen in many families at first, and I just needed to distract myself. I agreed without hesitation. He came over, and, well, you understand the rest. Today, my son is returning home after spending the weekend with his father. He told me over the phone that they talked to his father about the future of our family. I've been on edge all day, wondering what Mark said to our son. He wouldn't lie to our son if he was willing to come back home under certain circumstances. I think he might have told James about it. Besides that incident, I've never cheated on my husband. It was my only mistake in 16 years. My son doesn't know who his real father is, and I hope he never finds out. He loves Mark very much, trusts him, and is proud to have such a father. His relationship with his father is even better than with me. If he were to find out the truth now, it would break his heart. In general, a lot has changed over this week. Last weekend, my son talked to Mark, but Mark didn't say anything concrete about the future of our family. However, the possibility of reuniting with him was not denied. On Tuesday, I decided to finally have a normal conversation with my husband, so I invited him to a restaurant for a date, just like in the old days. Surprisingly, Mark agreed, almost immediately. This gave me confidence that the outcome could be positive. We didn't stay long at the restaurant and decided to take a walk in the park. The walk lasted for more than 4 hours, during which time we reminisced about our past, how much we loved each other, and how good we were together. Then we smoothly transitioned to discussing our future. I asked my husband to come back to the family, but he didn't respond, although it was clear that he also wanted it. That night, I intentionally sent our son to stay overnight at a friend's house, so the apartment was empty, and my beloved knew about it. We spent that night together, just like in the old times. In the morning, we didn't have much time to talk, my husband and I were in a hurry to work. In the evening, when my son and I were having dinner, unexpectedly, Mark came. He came with his belongings. Words cannot describe how happy James and I were at that moment. Our son even jumped into his father's arms out of joy. Could it be that he really forgave me? Most of all, I'm afraid that after living with me for a while, he'll realize that he doesn't want this family anymore. But I love him so much. I know I betrayed him and I'm ready to do anything to make up for my guilt. My husband didn't bring up the topic of fatherhood after his return. And although he doesn't pretend that nothing happened, he doesn't show any aggression or negativity towards me. And most importantly for me, his relationship with James hasn't changed. Although I was afraid that Mark might stop seeing James as his son, just yesterday evening, we talked about our son's future. We said that in 4 more years, our boy would be an adult and would probably leave home, too proud and independent. Mark said he enjoyed being a father, but we thought about having another child. I'm planning to make an appointment with a doctor soon, and I naturally told my husband about it. When he heard it, a happy smile appeared on his face. It was evident that he genuinely rejoiced at the news. In general, it was decided for me to become a mother again. It's been over a month since my last message. I started treatment, my beloved supported me morally and no longer dwelled on the past, if we believe the doctors. I have decent chances of conceiving, carrying, and successfully giving birth to a child after the treatment is over. Naturally, the treatment is not cheap, and it will take a lot of time. But my husband and I are ready to overcome any difficulties for our happiness. Looking back, I understand what a huge mistake I made, but time cannot be turned back. All I can do is take responsibility and live with the consequences of my decision. As for the family of the biological father of my child, things are not so good. Mark and Donovan haven't been communicating for several months. I sincerely believed that this story was over, but I was mistaken. I don't know how, but Donovan's wife found out that he has a child with me. I can't describe the extent of her disappointment and pain, from the betrayal not only of her beloved husband, but also of me, her best friend. Essentially, she now feels the same as my husband did several months ago, when he was betrayed by the two closest people in his life. However, since she found out, we only talked once, and it wasn't a conversation, it was more like she was screaming curses, crying throughout the apartment, and even slapped me several times. Since then, we haven't spoken at all. I didn't even try to reach out to her. I fully understand that she will never forgive me. All this time, I hoped she would change her mind and give her husband another chance, but last week she filed for divorce and kicked Donovan out of the house. What I'm most ashamed of in this whole story isn't even before Alice and Donovan, but before their two daughters. They're still young, 12 and 5 years old, and now, because of my mistake, their family is ruined. 6 people suffered because of me, my beloved husband, who devoted his entire life to his family, my son, who will never know that his beloved father, whom he idolizes, isn't his biological one, my best friend, who lost her marriage because of me, and is now alone with 2 children, her 2 little daughters, who lost their beloved father, and Donovan himself. Naturally, he lost the most in this story, a friend he was inseparable from for over 15 years, a wife who now doesn't want to see him, daughters whom Alice doesn't even allow to talk to their dad, and condenses them that he's a traitor, his apartment, which he worked for half his life for, and which his ex-wife will now take away. All this suffering, all this pain, is my fault. I don't even know if I have the right to have children. Why did my beloved forgive me? Why didn't he turn away from me? I started treatment so that we could have our own child, but to no avail in the end. We decided that there was no point in it. Nothing would come of it anyway, and these procedures aren't cheap. My husband reacted normally, as it initially seemed to me. Only later did I realize how much pain it cost him. But the worst happened at the end of the summer. It was exactly what I feared. Our son found out the truth. I'll never forget that day. I want to forget, but I can't. I sincerely believed that I could protect my child from the consequences of my sin. I hoped, I prayed, but in vain. When James found out the truth, something broke inside him. In just a few days, he turned from a sweet, kind boy into someone unrecognizable, a person ruthless towards us, his family. For almost 4 months now, we've been living in hell. Our son started drinking alcohol, smoking weed, staying out all night, and we don't know where he disappears to. He's made some terrible friends, and just seeing them gives me chills, shady girls with a reputation that's known throughout the neighborhood. We practically become regulars at the police station, but they haven't done anything substantial. Deal with your domestic issues yourselves, they say. We're left with nothing to do but search for our runaway child. What we heard there about Mark and our son. Our son even hates Mark now, although he used to stick to him like glue. The things he said to his father. I understand he's just a child suffering because of my sins, but my husband didn't deserve this. He's been through so much since the truth came out. And James. Then we decided not to have our own child. And now, on top of all this, Mark's having heart problems. A month ago, he was taken to the hospital with a seizure. They thought it was a heart attack. Thank God it wasn't, but now he's on medication. Possibly, he'll need surgery in the future. The doctors told him to avoid stress, but our son seizes every opportunity to upset him. I try to restrain him as best I can, but I can do very little. In my husband's eyes, I see his pain, his resentment. He just lies in bed for days and doesn't speak. I've told him that depression could harm his heart, but he doesn't listen. He's only 39, but he looks like he's aged 50 years. He's covered in wrinkles, huge bags under his eyes. I'm living in a hell of my own making. Every day, I curse myself for my mistake, my betrayal, and I pray to God to bring peace and tranquility to our family. But I don't believe in it anymore. Not in God, not in a happy ending for us. Only now, I realize how foolish it was to hope that such a crime would go unpunished for me. Just one betrayal destroyed the lives of 6 people, and it's on my conscience. Donovan's situation is even worse. He and Alice got divorced. She took everything from him, kicked him out onto the streets, and she went wild. She's out clubbing, drinking, changing lovers every week. She never recovered from her husband's betrayal and mine, her best friend, practically a sister. I tried to talk to her several times, but she'd fly into a hysterical rage, cursing, swearing, ready to fight. She was always a morally weak person, and I broke her. Their daughters live with her in a 1-bedroom apartment, just to avoid seeing mom's suitors. As for Donovan, I haven't heard anything for 6 months since their divorce, nothing at all. And then came December 31st, happiness, joy, celebration, but not for me. My husband went to his parents in another city, where James is, I have no idea. He doesn't answer the phone, and I have no friends left. People started avoiding our family when everything came out, as if we were lepers. I sit at the table with a bottle and cry, not tears of joy, just loneliness. Oh, how we celebrated last New Year's Eve. That was winter, real winter. What's the point of living? Will I find happiness in the new year? You don't have to answer. I know it myself. I'm sorry if I'm ruining your mood. I just wanted to talk to someone, to cleanse my soul. Happy New Year to you all. Happiness to you and your family. As we conclude our journey into the world of human relationships, please remember to subscribe, like, and share our content. Thank you for your support, and we look forward to seeing you in the next story.